were sitting around a table and they were filming us talking about different issues. It's going to be fun when it comes out. There's going to be some people whose heads are going to explode when they hear some of the things we said. But during that time, one of the young men that was bussing tables and doing all that in the conference room where we were was listening to what we had to say. And at the end, he approached one of the leadership and said, "How do I join you guys?" I mean, he had no idea about some of the things we talked about, yet he was able to have his mind and his heart open, and because of that, he got a little pin, Frederick Douglass Foundation, put it right there, and he's now going to be involved and engaged. We've got to do it one at a time. Absolutely. One at a time. And if you know one of the weirdos like me, enlist our help. You know, if you have an opportunity and you think that it would be easier for me or someone, another black conservative, to try and interact with someone or group or sit down with someone, let's try to do that. We're trying to get into churches to talk to pastors because we find that if we can get pastors one-on-one as opposed to them when they're in front of their congregants and they have to put on a certain air, we can actually make some breakthroughs. And we do it an issue at a time. We need to find those issues where our paths intersect and build alliances, like school choice. I believe that we need to really, and I criticize the Republican Party for this all the time, and I can do that. I'm with my Central Committee in Calvert County. See, I'm one of those hybrids. I get to be in the Tea Party movement and with the Republican Party, and so nobody talks to me because they don't want me to tell the other side. Now, actually, I'd say our Calvert County Central Committee is very much aligned with the Tea Party. They were the ones, in fact, that sponsored that first Tea Party. So find out where we can intersect on issues. School choice. There's a burgeoning pro-life movement. You've seen the stories about the billboards being put up in different cities. I met a lot of the people who are in the pro-life movement in the black community. They're all pastors, all very strong people of God, and they're undeterred. So we can build alliances there. The issue of marriage, you know, we have places where we can go. We just have to break through that idolatry of race. We have to make people believe that it is not their blackness that defines them. It's their humanity that defines them, their individuality that defines them. And it's that they can take and go out into the world and succeed. I mean, I would tell any of these young people, I would tell this young man, Frederick Douglass had none of the advantages you had. And he did it. Not only did he do it, he went down in history. You can too. You can too. I have to say I was really excited about this night, and it's not because I want you to buy my book. And by the way, thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. Because you'll find that it's a very personal one. I talk a lot about policies. You're going to find more statistics in there about how the liberals have harmed the black community than you ever thought possible. And I reference everything and I source everything because they're all going to come back and say, that's not true. I said, well, tell me about this. And I tie that into my own experiences. If America were an inherently racist society, then no black person would succeed. And too many millions have for that to be true. We've got to get past race. And let me make sure I explain one thing. When you start to interact with people who aren't where you are, as noble as it is, and I get into this discussion all the time, my Tea Party friends, my conservative friends say, but we're all Americans. Yes, we are. And that's where I am. And that's where I live. And that's how I raise my children. And that's how I live my life. But they're not there yet. So if it's important enough to them to relate to their blackness, start there. And I try to start there by saying, your heritage is not what you've become. Let's look at the great men of black history and the great women of black history and look at what they've done. You can do it too, and you know why? Because everyone in America is given the opportunity. Think about this. America is a nation unlike any other because it's not based on a common culture that's based on ethnicity, like the Germans or the Japanese or the French. America is built around an ideal. And it's an ideal that brings 1 million legal immigrants to America every year. 1 million people every year. Think about what it takes for you to get from your home country, where everything about you is defined, and to leave that behind and come here for an ideal. So everyone that's here has to embrace that ideal in order to become fully part of the American dream. If you look at people that have my skin tone, who come from the Caribbean, who come from Africa, and they don't have the history of black Americans here, they come here, they start businesses. African immigrants have higher levels of graduate education than even Japanese Americans. How many people would have known that? 49.8% of them go into business for themselves. When they're in Africa, they're entrepreneurs. They're working, they're scrapping, but they're not getting anywhere. They come here and that work ethic pays off. And in fact, there's even tension between African blacks and African American blacks, because a lot of employers say, I'm going to hire the immigrant because I know what to expect. There's entitlement here. There is hard work and no expectation here except gaining what you earn. So we're built around an ideal, and we all have to come to the point where we realize that it's the ideal that makes us exceptional as a nation. And I do believe that there is no other nation like America. I served my country, and at the time I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I understood at the time I took that oath who the foreign enemies were. Back in my day, it was the Warsaw Pact, ironically, Libya. I happened to be working as the intelligence watch officer on the day that we had Operation El Dorado Canyon, where Ronald Reagan sent in Air Force fighters to bomb Libya in 1986. So watching what we're doing right now, it brings back memories, but I'm also scratching my head. Anybody who wants to know why, you can ask me that later. But I didn't realize when I was serving at the time that there was a domestic enemy that I'd have to confront. And I don't say the enemy is people. The enemy is entitlement. The enemy is complacency. The enemy is the idea that if I desire it, it's a right. Okay? Our rights are pretty limited, quite frankly. You know, the right we have is the right to take the gifts that God has given us, whatever those might be, and use them to the best of our ability. There are no guarantees, but I'll give you an example. When you talk about poverty and the fact that the U.S. government has spent trillions of dollars on the war on poverty, statistics show that if you go to school, graduate, get a job, get married, then have kids, you're 4 times less likely to be poor. None of those steps has anything to do with federal government and its programs. Those are all actions that you take as a person. And that's the kind of thing we have to get people back to. And believe me, it's not just black people. Remember that statistic I cited earlier about out-of-wedlock births? The overall rate in America is 40%. It's growing. But I feel like we need to do a triage. We need to get to those folks that are about to drown, pull them out. And if we can pull them up, we can pull the nation up. And we pull them up because they're one of us. And I think it's really critical that we see more black faces in groups like this. Do you realize if we can get just 25% of the black community to come to our side, the liberals will never win a national election again in their lifetimes. 25%. And I'll tell you what, between the people that we elected, people that ran, first of all, I want to give credit to the 34 folks that stuck their necks out there as black Republicans to run for office. I worked for one in Maryland, Charles Lawler, who ran against Steny Hoyer. Tough race.